There are moments in life when saying goodbye feels heavier than anything you've ever carried. You question yourself. Was I too harsh? Did I give up too soon? Was I wrong to walk away? But what if that goodbye wasn't weakness? What if it was one of the strongest decisions you ever made? Sometimes we hold on to people, situations, and emotions far longer than we should, not because they are good for us, but because we fear letting go. Today, we will reflect on a powerful truth. Walking away is not always a loss. Sometimes it is the beginning of self-respect. My brothers and sisters, one of the hardest battles you will ever face is the battle between holding on and letting go. Because holding on feels familiar, even if it hurts, even if it drains you, even if it slowly takes away your peace. We often convince ourselves that staying is strength, that enduring pain without walking away is patience, that tolerating disrespect is loyalty. But there is a difference between patience for the sake of Allah and suffering at the hands of what He never asked you to endure. You were not created to live in constant emotional chaos. You were not created to beg for respect, to chase validation, or to remain in spaces where your worth is questioned again and again. Yet sometimes we stay not because it is right, but because we are afraid of being alone, afraid of starting over, afraid of what people will say. So we stay in conversations that break us. We stay in relationships that exhaust us. We stay in environments where our hearts feel heavy. And then we wonder why our peace has disappeared. Understand this: peace is not something small in your life. It is a gift, a blessing, a sign that your heart is aligned with what is right. And when something consistently steals that peace from you, you have to ask yourself, is holding on really worth it? Walking away does not mean you didn't care. In fact, sometimes you walk away because you cared too much. You gave your time, your energy, your sincerity, and you reached a point where continuing would only mean losing yourself. And losing yourself is never an option. There comes a moment when your silence becomes louder than your words, when stepping back becomes more powerful than explaining yourself again and again, when choosing distance becomes an act of protecting your heart. That moment is not weakness. That moment is clarity. Because real strength is not in how much pain you can tahmil, but in knowing when to stop accepting what damages your soul. Real strength is not in staying where you are disrespected, but in having the courage to remove yourself, even when your heart feels attached. You see, people often misunderstand walking away. They think it means giving up, but in reality it means waking up. Waking up to your value. Waking up to the reality of what you deserve. Waking up to the understanding that your peace matters. And when you walk away for the sake of protecting your heart, for the sake of preserving your dignity, for the sake of maintaining your connection with Allah, you are not losing anything valuable. You are releasing what was never meant to stay. Self-respect is something that does not announce itself loudly, but it changes the entire direction of a person's life when it becomes firm in the heart. It is not built in a moment of comfort, but in moments of discomfort where you finally decide that enough is enough. Many people misunderstand self-respect as pride, but they are not the same. Pride pushes a person to feel superior, while self-respect simply prevents a person from accepting what lowers them. A person may go through situations where they repeatedly give, repeatedly compromise, and repeatedly overlook things that slowly break them inside. At first, it feels like patience, it feels like understanding, it feels like being the bigger person. But over time, when the same pain keeps returning, something within begins to weaken. Not because the heart is weak, but because it has been stretched beyond what it can carry. Self-respect begins to awaken in those silent moments when you are left alone with your thoughts. When you replay conversations that hurt you. When you remember how many times you stayed quiet just to avoid conflict. When you recall how many times you accepted less than what your heart truly needed. And slowly, a realization forms that you were not created to constantly shrink yourself for the comfort of others. Boundaries are not walls built out of hatred. They are protection built out of wisdom. A person with self-respect understands that not every relationship, not every conversation, and not every environment deserves unlimited access to their heart. There are places where your presence should not require you to lose your dignity. There are connections where your kindness should not be taken as permission to keep hurting you. Yet many people ignore these signs. They continue to explain themselves to those who refuse to understand. They continue to stay in situations where their feelings are repeatedly dismissed. They continue to give chances, hoping that one day things will change, even when the pattern has already shown its truth. Self-respect steps in when the heart finally says that peace is more important than proving a point. It teaches a person that you do not need to stay where you are constantly misunderstood just to be seen as loyal. Loyalty without dignity becomes self-neglect, and self-respect refuses self-neglect. There comes a shift in understanding where a person no longer feels guilty for choosing themselves, no longer feels guilty for stepping back, no longer feels guilty for saying no, because at that stage they realize that every time they abandoned their own needs just to keep others comfortable, they moved further away from their own peace. And slowly, the heart begins to prioritize differently. It no longer rushes to fix what repeatedly breaks it. It no longer chases what constantly withdraws from it. It no longer sacrifices its stability for temporary attachment. Instead, it begins to value calmness over chaos, clarity over confusion, and dignity over dependence. This is not coldness. It is awareness. It is a person finally understanding that self-respect is not something you demand from others, but something you first enforce within yourself in the way you allow yourself to be treated. Not every connection in life is meant to last forever, and not every attachment that feels strong is necessarily healthy or beneficial for your heart. Human beings naturally become attached to people, memories, and situations because familiarity creates comfort, even when that familiarity is quietly harming them. The heart often confuses emotional intensity with importance, and emotional dependency with love or loyalty, when in reality some attachments are simply habits of the heart that were never meant to be permanent. There are relationships where you give your best, your time, your energy, and your sincerity, but what you receive in return does not match the depth of what you are offering. Yet you stay not because it is right, but because you are emotionally tied to what once felt meaningful. The mind recognizes the imbalance, but the heart resists letting go because it remembers the good moments and hopes they will return again. This hope often becomes the reason people tolerate what they should have outgrown long ago. Attachment has a way of making a person blind to reality. It makes red flags look like tests of patience. It makes distance feel like something temporary. It makes inconsistency feel like something that will eventually stabilize. But over time, these patterns do not fix themselves just because the heart is loyal. In fact, unchecked attachment often deepens the very pain a person is trying to avoid. Not every presence in your life is meant to remain close to you. Some people are only part of your journey for a season, to teach you something, to reveal something about yourself, or to redirect you towards something better aligned with your growth. But when a person refuses to accept that a chapter has ended, they often keep rereading the same page, hoping for a different ending. There is also a silent struggle that comes with holding on to what is not meant to stay. It drains your energy, it occupies your thoughts, and it prevents you from fully moving forward. You find yourself stuck between what was and what is, unable to fully embrace what could be, because your heart is still tied to something that no longer fits your life. Sometimes, attachment becomes so strong that even pain feels familiar enough to tolerate. Even disappointment becomes expected, yet still accepted. And that is where the danger lies. When a person becomes so used to emotional imbalance that they start believing it is normal. But deep within every heart, there is a quiet awareness that not everything worth remembering is worth holding on to. Some memories are meant to be appreciated, not relived. Some people are meant to be remembered, not pursued. Some chapters are meant to be closed with gratitude, not reopened with expectation. Letting go of certain attachments does not erase what happened. It simply acknowledges that what once existed has fulfilled its place in your story. It is the understanding that holding on to something that constantly pulls you backward prevents you from moving toward the peace and stability that is waiting ahead. Silence after a goodbye is often misunderstood by others, but internally it is one of the most powerful stages of healing a person can go through. When someone steps away from a situation, a relationship, or a connection that once meant something to them, the world outside may assume that nothing is happening anymore. But inside, a quiet process begins, one that does not need explanation, validation, or audience. In the beginning, silence feels unfamiliar. The absence of constant communication, the absence of checking in, the absence of emotional engagement creates a space that feels empty. The heart, which was once occupied with thoughts of someone or something, suddenly finds itself in a stillness it is not used to. And in that stillness, memories begin to surface more clearly, not because you are weak, but because the mind is finally free from ongoing distractions. This silence is not emptiness, it is processing. It is the mind slowly organizing what was once chaotic. It is the heart trying to understand what went wrong, what was learned, and what needs to be left behind. Many people mistake this phase as regression, thinking that if someone is quiet, they must be struggling in a negative way. But in reality, silence is often where the deepest form of emotional repair takes place, when you are no longer reacting, no longer explaining, no longer trying to fix what keeps breaking. Your energy begins to return to you. You start to notice things you were too emotionally involved to see before. Patterns become clearer, intentions become more visible, and the heaviness that once felt constant slowly begins to loosen its grip. There is also a quiet strength in not needing to announce your healing to the world. Not every process requires explanation. Not every wound needs to be shown to be valid. Sometimes the most sincere form of healing happens when no one is watching, when no one is asking questions, and when you are left alone with your thoughts and your connection with your Creator. During this silence, a person often begins to detach emotionally from what once had power over them. Not in a forced way, but gradually, as understanding replaces confusion. What once triggered strong emotion starts to lose its intensity. What once felt irreplaceable starts to feel distant. And what once controlled your feelings starts to lose its grip on your heart. This phase is also where self-awareness deepens. You begin to understand your own limits, your own patterns, your own responses. You begin to recognize how much of your energy was invested in things that did not bring you peace. And with that recognition comes a quiet shift in how you view your past experiences. Silence after goodbye is not about forgetting. It is about redefining your relationship with what happened. It is about allowing space for clarity to enter where confusion once lived. It is about stepping back from emotional noise so that the heart can finally breathe without pressure, without expectation, and without the weight of trying to hold on to what was already slipping away. There are moments in life when a person walks away from something, not realizing that the very step they took in silence is being witnessed by Allah in ways they cannot comprehend. Human beings may only see the surface of a goodbye, but the one who knows every intention, every struggle, and every hidden emotion sees far beyond what eyes can perceive. Sometimes you leave behind people who did not appreciate your sincerity. Sometimes you distance yourself from environments that were slowly draining your peace. Sometimes you step away from situations where you kept giving more than you were receiving. And in those moments, the heart may feel uncertain, wondering if the decision was right, wondering if it was too much, wondering if it was wrong to choose distance. But what is not always visible to you is that your patience in those situations, your restraint, and even your decision to walk away with dignity are not unnoticed. Every tear that was held back, every silence that replaced an argument, every moment you chose peace over conflict carries weight that is not lost. A person often feels alone when they make such decisions. They may think no one understands why they left. No one sees the pain behind their choice, and no one recognizes the effort it took to finally step away. But there is a reality beyond human perception, where nothing about your struggle is hidden or forgotten. There are situations where staying would have meant losing yourself further, where continuing would have meant compromising your emotional stability, where holding on would have meant slowly forgetting your own worth. And when a person finally steps away from what harms their heart, even if it hurts in the moment, it is not a sign of failure, but a sign of protection being placed around them in ways they do not immediately recognize. What feels like loss to the heart is sometimes a form of preservation. What feels like separation is sometimes a form of guidance. What feels like confusion, sometimes a redirection away from something that was never meant to define your peace. And in those quiet decisions where no one applauds, no one understands, and no one validates your choice, there is a deeper awareness that your struggle is not overlooked. Every effort made to protect your dignity carries meaning. Every moment you resisted lowering yourself for acceptance carries value. Every goodbye made with sincerity carries weight beyond human acknowledgement. Even when people misunderstand your silence, even when they misinterpret your distance, Even when they fail to see the reasons behind your actions, there is a reality that remains constant, that nothing done with sincerity and patience is ever ignored in the greater sense of justice and wisdom that governs every heart and every outcome. Emotional strength is often misunderstood by people who think that strength means staying, tolerating, and enduring everything without ever stepping back. But real emotional strength is not measured by how long you can remain in something that is hurting you. It is measured by how wisely you can recognize when something is damaging your peace and how firmly you can choose to protect yourself from it. There comes a stage in life where a person begins to realize that holding on is not always a sign of love, and letting go is not always a sign of weakness. Sometimes holding on becomes self-destruction disguised as loyalty, and sometimes letting go becomes self-respect disguised as pain. The heart struggles in that space between attachment and awareness, where emotions pull in one direction and clarity pulls in another. To let go of something that once meant a lot requires a level of inner strength that is not visible to others. People may only see the distance, the silence, or the absence, but they do not see the internal battle that took place before that decision was made. They do not see the nights where the mind replayed every detail, the moments where the heart resisted acceptance, and the quiet realization that continuing would only deepen the wound. Emotional strength is built in those unseen moments where a person chooses not to respond, even when they have every reason to react. It is built when a person chooses not to return to something that repeatedly broke their trust. It is built when a person resists the urge to reopen a chapter that was already closed through experience and pain. There is also strength in recognizing patterns. When a situation keeps repeating the same cycle of hurt, confusion, and disappointment, emotional strength allows a person to stop romanticizing the possibility of change and start accepting the reality of what is consistently being shown. This acceptance is not easy because the heart naturally hopes for improvement, but strength is what allows clarity to override hope when hope becomes harmful. A strong heart does not chase what constantly withdraws from it. A strong heart does not beg for consistency where inconsistency has already become the pattern. A strong heart does not keep proving its worth to those who have already chosen not to see it. Instead, it steps back, not out of bitterness, but out of understanding that peace is more valuable than prolonged emotional struggle. There is a quiet transformation that happens when emotional strength begins to develop. The same things that once caused anxiety begin to lose their control. The same words that once triggered deep emotional reactions begin to feel distant. The same situations that once held power over your mood begin to lose their influence. This is not because the heart has become cold, but because it has become wiser. It has learned that not every feeling needs to be acted upon, not every memory needs to be revisited, and not every connection deserves continued emotional investment. Emotional strength is not loud. It does not seek attention or validation. It is often silent, steady, and deeply personal. It is the ability to walk away without needing to explain yourself repeatedly. It is the ability to sit with your emotions without letting them control your decisions. It is the ability to choose long-term peace over short-term emotional attachment. And in that quiet strength, a person slowly learns that protecting their heart is not selfish but necessary, because a heart that is constantly exposed to what breaks it cannot function with clarity, stability, or peace in life. There are moments that shape you not by what you gain, but by what you choose to leave behind. A goodbye is often seen as an ending, but in reality, it can be a turning point where a person finally begins to understand their own worth. What once felt like loss slowly reveals itself as protection, and what once felt like pain begins to carry the lessons of clarity, dignity, and emotional maturity. Not every connection is meant to be carried forward, and not every attachment is meant to define your future. Some things are removed from your life not to break you, but to guide you back to yourself. And in that process, you begin to see that self-respect is not loud, but firm, not harsh, but firm enough to protect your peace from what repeatedly disturbs it. Walking away, staying silent, letting go, and choosing distance are not signs of defeat. They are signs of awareness. They are signs that your heart has started to recognize what is harmful and what is healthy. And even when the mind questions the decision, the soul often finds a quiet reassurance that peace must always come first. There is a deeper strength in no longer forcing what no longer fits, in no longer chasing what repeatedly leaves, and in no longer explaining yourself to those who refuse to understand. In that quiet acceptance, a person begins to grow into a version of themselves that values stability over chaos and clarity over confusion. What remains after the goodbye is not emptiness, but space. Space for healing, space for reflection, and space for something better to enter without the weight of what no longer belongs.